Hello everyone, we're here to talk about Harvest and containers. What if you could run Harvest into containers? Maybe some of you are already doing this. It's not really hard, but I came up with that project as part of my work on NABox version 3. If you don't know NABox, head over to nabox.org. It's a virtual appliance that manages Harvest, Graphite, Grafana, all in the seamless integration and the web interface. So as part of working on the NABox version 3, which is going to be fully containerized with a lightweight OS, I needed some way to containerize Harvest and still be able to communicate with it to add and remove controllers and that kind of stuff. So I came up with that project, which is called NABox Harvest, that I'm going to talk about today. So that's something I published on the Docker Hub. You can find it here on ybezel/NABox Harvest. And something you can use yourself. So it comes with quite some documentation, and what we're going to do today is do a quick run using Docker Compose. It's fully documented on the page, and I'm going to run this. We're going to do that together, and we're going to go back to the website to explain the different options that we have while it's collecting the first metrics. So let's do that now. On the bottom of the page, you will see that you have a Docker Compose YAML file that you can just copy and paste into the NetApp Harvest directory. Now, one thing is important to note is your NetApp Harvest installation needs to be complete, meaning you need to have downloaded NetApp Harvest from the NetApp website, and you need to have followed the documentation to install the library into the lib directory. It's all part of the standard NetApp Harvest install, but that needs to be done. That container does not come with NetApp Harvest pre-installed for licensing reason. So I do have my NetApp Harvest directory here, and I do have in the lib directory, I do have the different Perl libraries installed, so it looks like I'm in good shape. And I also have the Docker Compose YAML file that is the same one as on the website. And it's important that it's on into the NetApp Harvest directory. It makes everything easier for the what's to follow. One thing that is missing, and it's extremely important, is the NetApp Harvest conf file. So I can just start with an empty one, but it needs to be there. NetApp harvest.conf. I use the touch command just to create the file, and now I can run the whole stack using Docker Compose up, and I'm going to use -d to run that in the background. Looks like everything is running. Out of this, I should get 3 components operational: Graphite, our NABox Harvest interface, and Grafana. So let's check on the API. So you should be able to go to localhost on port 5000, and if you do this, you end up on a endpoint that doesn't serve any useful data. It is our API endpoint to interact with NetApp Harvest, but there is actually a Swagger available for this that makes tests and interacting with NetApp Harvest much easier. You might already be familiar with that interface. It's pretty standard for a lot of API endpoint using the REST protocol. So that is running. If I do get on the system and execute, I get an empty list because there's no systems configured yet. So let's continue our tour. I should have on localhost 3000 Grafana running, which is correct, and the default password that I put is NetApp01. Now I do have Grafana installed, but there is no dashboard or anything like that. We'll see how to do this later. And then I can head to port 8081. That's what I configured into the Docker Compose file for Graphite. And I see that I don't have much metrics here. One thing that we're going to find later here is the NetApp directory for the performance metrics. So there's a few things that I can do now. First of all, where are my dashboards? To do this, I just need to create an API key for NetApp Harvest. So I'm going to call it NABox Harvest, and it needs the editor role. I'm going to add this, copy, and what I do is I put it in the Docker Compose file as Grafana key. Okay. And then I'm just gonna up-d the stack, and it detects the change and it's recreating a NABox Harvest. So now hopefully if I close this and go home and look at the dashboard, it's actually being populated. I can reload and they're all here. I do get one of my favorite SVM dashboards here. One thing that you note is that there's a lot of sample data here. Why is that? It's because we don't have a data source yet. So we're going to add a Graphite data source that is on, you would have guessed, Graphite, and save. Now I can go back on that dashboard and see that there's nothing much going on. Why? Because I need to create the controller into the Swagger UI. Remember, that's the only thing that you're going to interact with when it comes to manipulating, removing, adding controllers on Command Unified Managers and all that stuff. It's actually divided in two sections. The systems adds your cluster or servant mode system, and the managers, they add your ActiveIQ Unified Manager on Command Unified Manager systems. So I'm just going to post a new system here by clicking on try out, and then the host name is cluster1.lab.inso.org. I do have a very secure password here, and the user is the very secure admin user. I do execute, and I can see the status is 200, so it looks like it worked. So let's check this using the get command here and execute. I can see that one item is returned, but I can see that the status is stopped. So I need to start the poller for this. So try it out. I just need to put the cluster name here, and the status is going to be started. Let's execute, check the status, it's 200, good. And we are going to get the systems again just to be sure. In the system, the status is now started. So the poller has started. It's going to take a minute or two to inject the first metrics into Graphite. If we head over to Graphite here, we see that there's nothing going on. It's going to take a minute. So while it's doing this, let's take a look at the documentation. Here's how it works. From the container perspective, there's three things that it needs to find when it runs. It needs to find a configuration file under the root directory. That's the NetApp Harvest conf. It needs to find NetApp Harvest itself into the root directory as well. And there's the log mapping here. So these are the three volumes in terms of Docker that you need to map to that container. And if you look at the Docker Compose file, that's exactly what we did here. The log files, the configuration files, and the Harvest directory. So that's what makes it run. And that's why you need to download separately the NetApp Harvest so that everything works together. Then you also have a few environment variables that you can use to customize. As you could see in the Swagger UI, I don't have any authentication here. So anyone can have access and delete my systems and everything. That's why you can set API keys, API users, and passwords here. Once that environment is declared, it's going to be protected, and people will have to use API key or a paired user password to interact with NetApp Harvest. There is an option to configure where to find the Graphite server, the Carbon daemon. It's the Carbon server environment variable. And it's set by default to Graphite because in the case of Kubernetes or in the case of the Docker Compose file, it's very often how you call the service. And then there's the Grafana key that we used to inject the dashboards. The Grafana key is used when the container starts. If it's present, it's going to populate the dashboards into Grafana. And then you have the server URL that you can customize here. That's useful if you have a reverse proxy and you're hiding multiple products or multiple websites under one endpoint. So that's pretty much it. Let's check that we get some data now. and we do see NetApp Perf here. So it is working. I'm going to check my dashboard, reload the page here, and see if I'm getting any new data. So my group is here. I start to see some latency numbers, and it looks like it's fully working. You can add more controllers, and you can use the REST interface to integrate Harvest into your infrastructure as code, for example, or to interact with your CMDB. Anything needs to be automated these days, and that's something that's lacking into Harvest, except manipulating and manually rerunning Harvest. Now you can do this with that container and using very modern interface like REST. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me a note if you want to give me feedback, or if you need anything. I'm always eager to understand how people are using that kind of stuff. Thank you and take care.